In a world where legacy is treated as the ultimate life goal, where leaving your mark is presented as what gives existence meaning, and where accepting that you'll be completely forgotten is dismissed as nihilistic depression, there's a huge group of people who genuinely, deeply don't want to be remembered after they die. Not because they lived meaningless lives, not because they're depressed, but because they've examined what being remembered actually means and concluded that posthumous memory is a burden to the living, that their consciousness won't exist to benefit from it, and that the idea of mattering after death is an ego-driven delusion that distracts from actually living. They watch others obsess over legacy, building monuments to themselves, desperately creating things to outlast them, and they feel absolutely nothing except relief that they've freed themselves from the tyranny of needing to matter beyond their own experience. If you're watching this right now, you'd be either one of these people feeling desperately validated that your lack of concern for legacy is in some existential failure, or you re someone deeply invested in being remembered and you genuinely cannot comprehend how anyone could accept complete oblivion. But here is the raw truth that nobody wants to acknowledge because it threatens our fundamental stories about meaning and mortality. Individuals who don't want to be remembered aren't giving up on life. They represent specific philosophical profiles that reveal how certain minds process death, meaning, and ego in ways that contradict the cultural narrative that we must leave a lasting impact to matter. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal will completely shatter assumptions about meaning, mortality, and the dangerous belief that significance requires permanence. Let me ask you something that will make legacy-focused people deeply uncomfortable. If you won't be conscious after death to know you remembered, who exactly is your legacy for? Isn't the desperate need to be remembered really just your ego unable to accept that the universe will continue without you? When you work on your legacy, are you creating genuine value or building an elaborate distraction from confronting death's absolute end? And here is the question that might make you re-examine your entire life. If being remembered mattered so much, why are 99.99% of humans who ever lived completely forgotten, and why? Does this harm absolutely no one because the dead don't exist to care? These questions sit at the raw core of understanding why some people don't want to be remembered. To understand this, we first need to recognize the enormous cultural pressure that positions legacy as the ultimate measure of a life as worth. From ancient times through modern self-help culture, we're taught that mattering after death is what separates a meaningful existence from a wasted life. Every motivational speaker tells you to build something that outlasts you. Every life coach asks about your legacy. We've constructed entire meaning systems around the idea that you must be remembered. This creates what we might call the legacy imperative, where your life's worth is measured by what remains after you're gone. Not pursuing a legacy marks you as having given up or lacking ambition. But here is where we need to get brutally honest. The need to be remembered is often the ego's desperate attempt to deny death's finality. Letting go of that need isn't nihilistic surrender. It's a mature acceptance that allows for a fuller presence in actual living. Some people have philosophically examined legacy and recognized it as an illogical concern for a dead self that won't exist to benefit. Some people understand that real meaning comes from the quality of lived experience, not from posthumous memory. These people aren't depressed or meaningless. They're often living more fully and authentically than those driven by legacy anxiety. This lack of legacy desire emerges from 5 distinct traits. First, acceptance of mortality's absolute finality. People who don't want to be remembered have typically achieved a genuine acceptance that when consciousness ends, they won't exist in any form to experience being remembered. They've integrated the reality that posthumous memory benefits only the living. Legacy concern requires believing some aspect of you persists to benefit from remembrance. But when you truly accept that you will be absolutely nothing after death, legacy becomes a logically incoherent concern. This acceptance isn't depressing. It's liberating. It frees them from curating their life for posthumous audiences. because these create a lasting impact, but because the experience itself is valuable while it's occurring. Their metric for a good life isn't what remains after, but how richly they live during. By releasing legacy concern, they paradoxically live more meaningfully because that meaning is extracted from the experience itself, rather than deferred to an imagined future where they won't exist to receive it. Third, ego transcendence. The third trait is having done substantial ego work that releases the attachment to self-importance. Legacy desire is fundamentally ego-driven. It requires believing you're important enough that your existence should matter beyond your lifetime. People who don't want to be remembered have typically examined this self-importance and recognized it as ego inflation. They've achieved what spiritual traditions call ego death or ego transcendence. They understand they're one consciousness among countless billions across time. This doesn't mean they devalue their life while living. It just means they don't inflate their importance to a cosmic or historical scale. Fourth, burden awareness. The fourth trait is the awareness that being remembered is a burden on the living and the desire to release others from that obligation. They've observed how grief and memory maintenance can trap living people in the past, preventing full engagement with their own present and future. They recognize that being remembered means occupying mental and emotional space in others' lives after you're gone. This isn't about being unmemorable while alive. It's about not wanting the memory of them to burden others after death. They'd rather be forgotten quickly so living people can move on fully, using their energy for their own lives. Fifth, anti-narcissism and historical perspective. The fifth trait is having examined human history and recognizing that almost everyone is forgotten. They've contemplated that billions of humans lived full lives with hopes, dreams, and accomplishments, and are now completely forgotten. Even for famous historical figures, most people remember nothing substantive beyond their names. And eventually, all human memory will cease when humanity ends. From this perspective, the pursuit of legacy can seem somewhat narcissistic, as if your particular life deserves an exemption from universal forgetting. They've embraced what some call cosmic insignificance, not as a depressing truth, but as a liberation from self-importance. When you combine these traits, mortality acceptance, present moment meaning, ego transcendence, burden awareness, and historical perspective, you get a profile where not wanting to be remembered isn't existential failure, but a mature integration of mortality that enables fuller living. Here's what legacy culture desperately doesn't want to acknowledge. The desperate need to be remembered is often a death denial mechanism. Releasing that need isn't giving up on meaning. It's finding more authentic meaning in actual living. The truly raw truth is that legacy obsession is often a form of narcissistic death, anxiety that diminishes the quality of your actual life. People spend their lives performing for posthumous audiences, making choices based on how they'll be remembered rather than what brings genuine present satisfaction. Meanwhile, people who've released legacy concern often report living more authentically, experiencing greater peace with mortality because they're not fighting the inevitable oblivion. But examine whether you're living for an imagined future audience or for your actual experience. Consider whether legacy concern enhances your life or burdens it with performance anxiety. If you're someone who doesn't want to be remembered, I hope this provides profound validation. You're not depressed or nihilistic. Your acceptance of oblivion indicates a mature integration of mortality and liberation from the ego's demand for cosmic importance. You can live a deeply meaningful life that ends completely. Your significance is in your experience, not in its persistence. The deeper truth is that meaning doesn't require permanence. A kind action has complete worth whether it's credited or anonymous. A life well lived is sufficient unto itself without requiring posthumous validation. Now I want to hear from you. Does the idea of being completely forgotten disturb you or liberate you? Have you examined why being remembered matters to you? This requires real vulnerability. Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. If this challenged your assumptions about legacy and meaning, hit that like button. Subscribe for more raw truth about existence that questions what we're told gives life meaning.